We'll begin our meeting tonight by hearing from Councilmember Ryan Barker. He'll be giving us an indication or a thought along with leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to excuse Charlotte. I believe she's online with us, but she's dealing with a few things, so I'm not sure she'll be voting with us this evening. And Phil is, I think, joining us by phone, John.
Yes, he's online.
Phil is with us. He's driving on the way to another destination. So I think he'll be participating fully with us tonight via phone. So Councilmember Barker, would you like to proceed?
Yeah. Can I actually give an invocation and then a thought? Do both?
I think so.
I'm going to try to overachieve tonight.
That's going to be the case. So
All right.
proceed.
Okay, I'll start with the invocation. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful that we can meet tonight as a North Ogden City Council. We're grateful for the opportunity to come together as citizens, council members, mayor, and staff, that we can discuss what's best for our city. Please bless it. We'll be led by the Spirit, and that we can make wise, conscious decisions tonight. And these things we say in Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. So my thought. I'm actually kind of excited that I got to give the thought tonight, since yesterday was September 11th. That has a lot to do with police, fire, chief. You can kind of correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm not going to remember this. There were 343 firefighters lost in the World Trade Centers. I don't know how many officers, if you guys know. I read yesterday, as of yesterday, there were 341 more firefighters that have died since 9/11 because of the trade centers coming down. So this year we're gonna actually bypass that amount. So when we say never forget, let's never forget. And then let's say that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good timing.
Sorry, I was caught up on a call.
Good time. So we'll begin tonight. Chief, maybe you'd like to introduce Jaden, and then we'll have Ryan swear him in as a new officer in our city.
So this is Jaden Hammer. He's our newest officer. He started last week. Today's his first day out on the road. Yes. And he's already, I can tell he's out of breath. He's been working hard. So Jaden came to us. He's worked the last 3 years for Weber State University Police Department, where he's got a fair amount of experience, but came to North Ogden, where we'll actually show him how it's done. So Jaden, he lives in South Ogden with his family and a child. Yes. And wife. So we're glad to have him.
Okay, ready for this? Okay, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Yay, congratulations.
Councilmember Barker. This is Jamie Dalpad, John Collar, city manager, city attorney.
Good to meet you.
This is Ryan. She's our city recorder. And Mayor. Yeah. Yeah.
Chief, fully staffed now, right?
Yes, sir.
22.
Fully staffed.
Oh, good job. Thank you. Before we get in deeply into our agenda, I think we've all had a chance to look at the items. Is there any conflicts of interest need to be disclosed this evening, or concerns you'd like to discuss? Bill?
Has not muted anything there, so he's good, I guess.
Okay, we'll go.
I'm here. I can hardly hear you guys, but I'm here.
All right. No conflicts that, regarding the agenda tonight? We'll take that as a no. Okay.
Can you repeat that, please?
We're going to move on to item number 3 on our agenda. It's an action to consider the July 25th, 2023 City Council meeting minutes. You had a chance to look at those, and do you have any comments? Councilmember Dalpas, please.
Yeah, just a couple of minor corrections. On page 12 of the packet, it says Community and Economic Development Director Cooper. Instead of Cooper, it should be Hess. And then on page 16, on the second line, it should say Northview Fire District instead of North Davis Fire District.
Okay, any other corrections, Councilmember Dalpas? Thank you for those. With those corrections, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of July 25th, 2023 City Council meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the June 25th? Mine says
Aye.
July 25th meeting minutes. Please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any-
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Now go on to our active agenda, and we'll invite the public to step up to the podium here if they have any comments they'd like to make. Just as a kind reminder, you would limit your comments to 5 minutes at the longest. If you'd state your name, and if you're a resident of North Ogden, and you have something pertinent to the city, please step up to the podium.
Christina Watson, North Ogden. So last time RDA was on the agenda, I thought there was going to be a work session, and maybe there was and I missed it. But I still wanted to give my opinion on that. You know, as I'm meeting people in the city, I hear of people who have a headache every time more money is needed for the Barker Park. And I just hesitate if we get into resurfacing the creek at Kurtz Plaza, that it would not be able to be funded this one-time situation, and then it would be a repeat of that story where we have to keep adding money and keep needing money. And I don't know if it's not a good project. I just wonder if we need to wait until we have all the funds to take on and finish a project rather than just leave it half done. I am a fan of bringing the aquatic center back up to standard with that money, and also taking care of Bicentennial Park. And I know that the playground equipment is on the budget every year to redo a different playground every year. But being one of the few who help pick out that particular equipment on the Parks and Trails Committee, it is mediocre at best every time we get the money and we can do that. And we this year have grants to supplement quite a bit. And so it's way more than what was originally designated for that, but it's still going to be mediocre at best at Lomond View when we get to do that. And I'm grateful that we get to have the pickleball, and I wouldn't want that to be given up. But if there is extra money that can go to the city, we might want to set aside either more to upgrade the current Lomond View plans, or another playground equipment that next year we barely have enough to have, 5 or 10 kids play on it at once. Is going to be really small, less than mediocre. So anyway, that is one other idea I wanted to add. And then I know that it's been mentioned in previous meetings talking about the effects of the flooding in all the parks that are retention ponds. And I'm still worried about that, even though there is money that's going to be taking care of that. I don't know if you've been there in person, but if you haven't, I would suggest you go look because it is very, very poor shape. And to be able to use those in any time in the next few years, it's gonna have to be reseeded or something. Because I just recently, the other day, looked at Green Acres. So I'm sure Wadman and some of the other places are similar, but it's embarrassing. So anyway, I don't know if there's sufficient funds to take care of that so that it can be back up to something that can bring our city quality of life. Thank you.
We haven't had the work session yet.
Oh.
So just for your information, I think we'll have a brief discussion tonight, but the work session is still scheduled. So. Is there anyone online, John, that would like to comment this evening?
No raised hands.
All right, I don't see anyone else here who's anxious to step up and make comments, so we'll move on to our next item. I believe Councilmember Severing will be presenting on this. This is a discussion or action to consider an ordinance amending the city code 8-8, which is private landscaping on public property. This evening, just so we know the vote will take place, we'll start with Councilmember Barker, come down to Councilmember Dowpaz, Councilmember Severing, and we'll end with Councilmember Swanson on the phone. That's okay. And I think Councilmember Ekstrom has asked Stephen not to participate in voting. So, okay, go ahead, Councilmember Severing.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Those who attend regularly here to City Council, and obviously the City Council staff will know that we've been discussing for the last, probably the last year, different issues with city ground being leased by private families in the city. And there was a discussion recently on some ground that is being leased by a family. And the discussion came up about the fencing on the ground. And in discussing with them, the idea was just developed about whether for fencing, for example, there has to be X amount of privacy, 65 to 75% transparency. And in discussions with some of the other city councilmen, we thought maybe there would be some time to just discuss the whole idea of what and why of privacy. So we just kind of want to understand, does the city have to be able to see through that fencing for a reason?
That's a good point. I think the current ordinance is 75% transparent. Frankly, I think my opinion has not changed. I know it's contrary to some here, and I respect your opinions, but I don't think generally city-owned property should be fenced off and not available to the public, other than when there's perhaps crops being grown on there. But that's just my opinion, but I think the question you have, if I understand Councilmember Severing, is that should we change the ordinance to allow less transparency? I guess I think it's 75% now. John, is that right?
Yeah, the way the ordinance writes is you can't have more than 25% non-transparent, which is 75% transparent. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Attorney Matt.
Good calculation.
Good calculations, John. So in essence, the way it would stand now means there would probably have to be chain link or wrought iron fence, basically, because I don't think they make vinyl fence that would meet the 75% requirement. So are you asking to have that reduced to something that vinyl would qualify for? Is that?
Well, I'm not necessarily asking one particular direction, other than just maybe a discussion about the whole idea of whether it needs to be transparent or not. If a citizen is leasing some ground and the majority of their fence is privacy, and then we have to put a transparency code on it. we're just kind of debating about the idea of why transparency in the first place.
Okay, well, let's find out how the council feels about that. Let's start with Councilmember Barker. In that order, then we'll come down to Councilmember Dalpas. And we'll ask Phil to comment.
I had a discussion with Scott Hess last week, and it's more on the percentages. I have, my issue with this is percentages. If you can't, I would be more inclined to say that, yes, you can have a privacy fence, semi-transparent to the lowest level, whatever the product is. Because if you can't, if you're trying to put up a vinyl fence and you can't do it because it's got to be, let me make sure I'm just saying the right, 30% non-transparent, for example, not 25, then that's an issue. And in my opinion, this is on my opinion, vinyl fencing is a lot nicer than chain link fence. And that's about where we're at. Either you're doing a chain link fence or no fence. And so it's,
Wrought iron.
yeah. You can put up a wrought iron fence if you want, but I'm gonna guess they're not, it'll go to a chain link fence. The issue about whether we should fence city property, that's a different question.
Any other comments? No. Councilmember Dalpas, let's go with you.
I do remember there was a resident or two that commented on this the night of, and they were kind of perplexed about fencing in this leased portion of property. And I guess it didn't hit me so hard that night, but I had thought about it actually sporadically, even before this came back on the agenda, that it does seem kind of strange that we're allowing for these leased these leased areas to even be fenced at all. It just, I mean, it's owned by the public, it's owned by North Ogden City, it's owned by the people essentially. So it just, that kind of has given me some heartburn. So I'm not super particular on percentages and how that looks, but I'm a little bit worried about the fencing scenario as a whole.
So the ordinance currently allows for fencing, right? So I understand your comment there and appreciate it. So I guess the discussion is done here is a change in the ordinance, John, and it could be changed to not allow fencing or to allow more transparent fencing.
Yeah, it's just on the agenda for the council. You could change it as you see fit tonight.
Appreciate your comments, council. Do you have further comments before we go to Phil?
Well, no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Councilmember Swanson, would you like to comment on this issue?
Yeah, just a couple of quick thoughts on this. When we had this discussion and passed this ordinance, one of the discussions, if you'll remember, that we had was, do we even allow any kind of fencing at all? And Mayor, I know that you were in favor of disallowing fencing. I think the compromise that was struck was to allow fencing as long as it was 75% transparent. So it kind of met the, gave the, I guess, maintained some of the appearance that it's public land without it being completely fenced off with opacity that makes it look like it's private land. That's the heartburn I'm having, is that it felt to me when we had this discussion before, the compromise between fencing versus no fencing was to have this level of opacity on the fencing itself. That's where I'm sitting at the moment.
Okay. Council, other comments?
So, yes, Mayor, our question for tonight is whether we're discussing the transparency issue, not whether we're going to allow a fence or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I just haven't really felt like we've got enough answer to know, should there be a transparency or should there not be a transparency code? And that's kind of where And if there's a need for a transparency code, what is the foundation behind it? Because when we drive by, we can see that the public ground is not being planted with marijuana. Do we drive by and see that people there are doing good things? I mean, I'm just trying to understand the rationale behind the transparency need anyway.
My understanding is that it makes it more kind of open, instead of closed off and making totally like private ground. That's, I think, my recollection of the reason, but I don't know, that's what I recall, is that it was to prevent it looking like private property. But Councilmember Alpens?
Was there a particular resident or place that has spurred this conversation again? Because I'm not aware of that.
I think there hasn't been a family that's approached me about this issue, but I think it's not just for this. I think it's an ordinance that's gonna, perplex the city if there were other individuals interested in leasing ground. So I think it's probably worth at least discussing.
Okay. Councilmember.
Mayor,
No, you can go.
Go ahead, Phil.
who is the family that is approached you, council member? I think the public has the right to know who that is. And the second question that I have is, what specifically is their concern with the opacity requirement as it is now? Is it that they want to do a vinyl fence and there isn't that opacity available? I don't, it sounds like there is a specific individual or family that has approached you about this. It's not just a general discussion. And I'm interested in knowing what their specific concern is.
Well, my approach tonight, Phil, is if I think this is a general ordinance, I don't think it has necessarily, I don't know if I have the responsibility to disclose the family when it is a general ordinance. Part of their concerns was the distance between, trying to reconcile between interior railings and fence railings for safety as part of that concern.
If council member Severing, if that individual had not approached you about this issue, about their concern with this issue, would you have been bringing this issue up on your own?
I don't know, Phil. It's just part of my responsibility as a city council to represent the city. And if they contact me, I bring the issue to the floor.
Oh, I understand that. I think it's also our responsibility, our fiduciary responsibility, if somebody is wanting to variance to an ordinance, especially in the use of city land, that we know who it is.
And Phil, I would say, we've had other instances where citizens have gone to council members and asked for ordinance changes. I'm not sure that's been a procedure of disclosing who that was. I think there was legitimate reasons historically not, but I believe from my understanding on this, it is someone that has approached the city before on the issue. And I understand that there's really not vinyl fencing made that meets the requirement. So the individual is faced with either putting in a chain link fence, or as Councilmember Barker doesn't like the wrought iron fence.
No, I didn't say I didn't like it. I just don't see him doing it.
Yeah, well, and the fact is, it'd be adjacent to a current vinyl fence, right?
And that was my concern with this thing. If a resident's putting up a vinyl fence and they want to put a semi-transparent, I can't speak the big words like Councilman Swanson, opacity or, but why, if there's not a fencing material allowed to meet this 25%, that's the issue I have. We're gonna make them go from a vinyl fence to something else next to it, and I don't think it might not look as good.
All right, any other comments? On our agenda tonight is a proposal to change the ordinance, specifically the transparency of the ordinance, but it could be changed based upon council's motions to change the fencing rule in its entirety. So at this point in time, I would be looking for someone on the council to make a motion for us to consider in amending City Code 8-8 regarding private landscaping on public property. Do we have such a motion?
Mayor, I'll try this, see if I can put it in my wording. I would like to see us make a motion that instead of tying it to a percentage, we tie it to the minimum building material out there. So right now vinyl fencing goes down to 1.5 inch slats. If in the future it drops to 1 inch slats, then it'll go down to that. I'm not a fan of tying it to a percentage. But I'd say we address the building materials. Does that make sense?
Available building
Available
materials,
building materials.
the most transparent available.
Yes.
Vinyl building materials, because there's other materials that are, I'm just trying to get this clarified.
That, yes, I was gonna say, because cement block has no transparency, so,
I should just
Yeah.
put every other block.
yeah, vinyl, between vinyl. Oh my God, why did you make me do this? Yeah,
So if I understand your motion, it would be to allow vinyl fencing.
and I'm not saying, yeah, I don't even know if we can make a
Most
motion on it
transparent
tonight, or if we need to have more discussion and look into see what it is. That's my motion, is that we need to address this more.
Is your motion then to postpone?
Postpone this until we get more information, yes.
Okay, so we have a motion to postpone?
Yep.
We have a second to that motion.
I second that.
Have a motion to postpone this item. Is there any further
Figure that
discussion
out.
on that? Okay, all in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye.
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 Motion to postpone passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is a discussion for an action to consider the Village of Prominence Point Development Agreement Amendment. Scott Hess, who is our planning director, will be leading this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In the development agreement right now for Village of Prominence Point, there is a list of commercial uses that are possible. And it actually says that any of the commercial uses permitted in our commercial zones for North Ogden are permitted except for these. And so it's an exceptions list that runs down the line. When Village of Prominence Point was first conceived, it was looked at as a walkable community. They wanted something that was a little bit different than just your standard strip commercial along Washington Boulevard. And I think that the developer, both prior and the one that has purchased the property now, has had a difficult time finding tenants that meet those requirements. So they've been approached by a tenant that would like to do a drive-through use. Given the constrained site on the 2 commercial parcels, there's 3 commercial parcels left, one on the corner of 1700 North in Washington, and then 2 internal parcels that are between car wash and that corner piece. They've been approached by someone who wants to do a drive-through that would circle and surround the whole building. So it's important to note that drive-through uses are permitted in the development agreement. It's just the location of the drive-through itself as it relates to the building. They are not permitted to be between the building and the roadway. So an example for you that you might be able to point to in your mind is Nelson's brand new drive-through. The drive-through surrounds the building, so it's between the building and 2600 North, but Subway has an internal drive-through. So Subway is adjacent to Washington Boulevard, with the drive-through being on the east side of the building. So in this case, the change would be to permit what's kind of conceptually shown there on the right side of that picture, to allow the drive-through to surround and go around the building.
I have a question, Mr. Hess. I believe some time ago, this might have been by Councilmember Barker, the council authorized the mayor and yourself to make these type of amendments to the agreement.
Within, so it's in the MPC zone, we can do it within 5%. So if we determine that a change is at or less than 5% of the overall master plan in the area, then you and I can make these changes.
Is this greater than 5%?
By surface area alone, and if you, it depends on what you qualify.
Is this transparent, the 5% or 7? I mean, how do you
I
determine?
don't think it's not one that, it's one that I felt like the planning commission and the city council should weigh on, basically.
I just don't want to
Yeah.
go outside of what the council instructed us to do.
I would say this is because we had a very clear exceptions list in this development agreement. And if it were something like your setback is 10 feet and it needed to be a 5% reduction because of accommodating a gas line, we had to accommodate a utility or something like that. That's for that 5%.
Just wanted to clarify here that, yeah, that's good, because I know the council is kind of been worn out on amendments here, for those who have been around for a while. So anyway,
So the planning commission weighed in on this. They had a healthy discussion about what Village at Prominence Point was originally conceived to be, what sort of the realities of the market are today, what COVID has done to change the restaurant and food industry generally, people's desires to stay in their car and use a drive-through use, and just kind of practicalities of what they saw on Washington Boulevard, and determined that their recommendation was to make this amendment to the development agreement and permit drive-throughs that are located between where the drive-through lane runs between the building and the street, but added a provision that it be behind a 3-foot tall landscaped berm. So you have a berm at the back of sidewalk, 3 feet tall, with some sort of buffering or hedging or landscaping above that berm that helps block and provide some visual buffer between the buildings and the drive-through.
council, do you have any questions for Mr. Hess? And the developer here tonight, also, if you have any questions. Have you got it?
Thank you.
Okay. Those any questions? Phil, do you have any questions? Can you still hear us?
I'm still here and I have no questions.
Okay. So the amendment would be to allow for that? Did you want
I just want to point out,
to, Steve?
my name is Steve Davies, a representative for UVA Development. Just point out, could we have that last slide up, show the site? On this one, we have the option, if you can see, that we've got the parking on the west, which is in the neighborhood side, and then we've got proposed the drive-through between Washington Boulevard and our building. Conceivably, we could flip that, but then that would put the parking against the street, which we think wouldn't be as attractive as just a drive-through. And so we're getting, it is an approved thing to put a drive-in in. So we could do it the other way, but we just feel like this is a better way of doing it. It'd be more attractive from Washington Boulevard side to bring our parking in line with the rest of the development, to bring it inside. And we do have a landscape development here that shows considerable landscaping between Washington Boulevard and the.
So it requires, based upon the recommendation of the planning commission, a 3-foot landscape berm. That's part of the amendment.
Yeah, that shows here.
Of course, you know the mayor's stance on this. Any further amendments wouldn't take place till after the meeting with the citizens.
Mhm.
You know, when
We have
meeting's,
that meeting scheduled for 2 weeks, I believe it is, after we get our building permit, occupancy permit on the clubhouse, which I went over just a minute ago. And we've got a little bit of concrete to do there, which we can do.
because I think we had it scheduled for August 31st, right?
I think we put it off simply because wanted to make sure that we had the clubhouse ready to occupy. We wanted to have a meeting in the clubhouse.
So this amendment timing be adequate in conjunction with that meeting then?
I would think so.
Okay, good. Perfect. Thank you. Any questions for Steve?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We have before us then a request to amend the development agreement at Prominence Point to allow the type of drive-through that was just put on the screen here. John, could you help with the language so that we get a proper motion in regards to making sure the berm and the, whatever it is there, so.
Yeah, so Scott had included this language, which was in your packet, that shows, so the existing language is still there. The drive-through businesses where the drive-through lane is located between the building and the public street, and then the comma, unless a 3-foot landscaped berm is located between the drive-through lane and the public street. So there's an exception to the exception. But this would cover what is being requested.
Councilmember Galvez.
I didn't think I had a question for Scott Hess, but I think I do now. So Scott, if I understood you correctly, you were saying that drive-throughs are permitted if they are on the other side.
Yes.
Okay, because I thought, as I was reading through, which obviously clearly I didn't read through good enough, I thought that drive-throughs were expressly not going to be permitted on these sites at all, but that's wrong then.
Yeah, so it says the exceptions to any uses in C2, so auto sales, repair, bars, taverns, Christmas tree sales, drive-through businesses where the drive-through lane is located between the building and the public street. And if an application came in that had a drive-through business where the drive-through lane wasn't located in that restrictive area, I would permit it.
Okay. We had some resident concerns that came to the council through email over the last couple of days. And one of the concerns is drive-throughs will produce more traffic on that small street that's to the west of the car wash and this site. So if this were to flip in the other direction, and we're not talking about the exception to the rule, aren't we still essentially dealing with the same potential issue that traffic will be increased because there's a fast food restaurant or a quick serve restaurant that has a drive-through?
Yes. Yeah, there's no, I mean, unless the council were to remove drive-throughs altogether, which, you could amend the development agreement that way, but that's not the question being asked tonight. We would permit those through the site plan process. The site plans in this particular development agreement, since the MPC follows its own track, come to the council. So you'll see the site plan for the commercial site on this. It won't go to planning commission per the development agreement, but otherwise, yeah, we would permit it.
I think you're correct. The traffic would probably be the same. And I know back when this development agreement was put together, things were a little bit different. I think it's hard for a business to almost survive without drive-through today. So I don't think, from Scott, from your standpoint, in regards to his question, just to clarify, this isn't going to create more of a traffic problem than if it was just the.
No, and potentially it should create a little less conflict, I think, just looking at how you'll be able to keep the parking internal on the west side of those buildings and create drive-throughs that kind of circle the parking. So you end up with captive parking instead of parking in the drive-through intersecting together, which is like Subway does right now, which is a retrofit of that building to fit a drive-through in. But otherwise, you would just eat up some of the parking space on the west side of those buildings with the drive-through lane, and may or may not even be able to adequately park those cars.
I think the concern of the citizens is, those roads right now are so.
They're small.
Yes,
They're narrow.
Yeah, very narrow but
But they're private
so I would
streets
have,
now.
this isn't gonna cause a difference. That's already there.
So, and if I understood you correct, you're somewhat of the opinion that by reversing it in this direction, it might be a better traffic flow situation.
It'll give a longer queuing line. It gives an opportunity for a longer queuing line, which was like a concern over here at Nielsen's. Why we went with the double, and the double at Fizz is concerns about queuing. So the potential for a car to back up onto that private street to the west of Washington Boulevard is probably less, because you've got a longer distance to come down before you wrap the building. But it depends on use. If you get, I don't know. I'm not going to name a really exciting hamburger joint or something like that. It doesn't matter where it's at, it's going to be really busy.
My concern is, and I don't know how we even control this, if it's a permitted use. I mean, in Ogden, people went crazy over Jack in the Box of all places. And Harrison Boulevard has been a complete mess because of this very normal fast food joint. And, you know, so I'm just worried about, I don't know if the developer can even divulge, but it's like, what is the place? Because if it's going to be a problem, it makes me less wanting. Yeah. Because you enter from Washington on that lane that's in the middle of the photo, you wrap around and almost immediately go into the drive-through. And if you have one of those really high demand fast food restaurants, the first few weeks are gonna be a disaster. And if it's something like Chick-fil-A level, then it's always gonna be a disaster. So it's just a little concerning to not know more information about what it might be. So that's it.
And during the site plan process, that information would be made aware. So I think the question today is this positive, negative, neutral for the city and for Village of Prominence Point to have the drive-through lane located between the building and the site? Because you could direct through the site plan process that on a really busy day, you can't make that right-hand turn. Like you could put a pork chop there, like a little engineering, solution that would make snow plowing annoying, so they probably wouldn't want to do it, but you could maybe restrict that right-hand turn in some ways, or limit it to residents only or something like that. So people have to queue down the whole road, and then you come in off of 1700 North. Not everybody will comply with that, but the site plan process is the time that you can help to control and alleviate some of those issues. But this is like, think of the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. And then it's also North Ogden, so it's going to be on the frozen yogurt mix. That's what it is.
All I heard is it's gonna be a pork chop fast food restaurant. That's all I heard.
Ice cream on pork chops.
Scott, just to clarify, because I think Councilmember Alpaz has a good point. So my understanding is this is neutral, in your opinion. Right?
It is, given what Village of Prominence Point is now versus what it was conceived to be 10 years ago. Had it been a really vibrant, walkable neighborhood where these buildings were fronting the street, had more form-based code, this probably wouldn't be something that we look towards. But given what Washington Boulevard is and the precedents that we have along Washington Boulevard for this type of development, I think it's neutral and certainly not overly impacting to the area.
Definitely things have changed in the last 10 years, no doubt. So it being neutral, and I think Steve has a good point, and I appreciate that, to keep the parking more aesthetics. Can we require in the amendment how the building is set? And how would we do that?
That's a good question. We don't really have
I think
setback.
we want to keep it as aesthetic as possible and allow as much parking and as less interference, but it being neutral. Mr.
So
Paul?
if you were, for example, okay with this setup, we could say this is the acceptable layout for a building. And we could attach it as an exhibit to this amendment.
All right, any further comments? Councilmember Swanson? Line?
No, JD, Councilmember Dalpaz clarified I like Councilmember Dalpaz was somehow thinking that we were effectively going from no drive-throughs to allowing drive-throughs. And not they're allowed, but we would be amending where it would be located. So that clarification has helped me. Thank you.
Okay. Council, I think Steve agreed to this timing wise. If we could put in the amendment that this becomes effective in conjunction with the meeting itself, I'd appreciate that if you so feel inclined. I do think that sanctions. So I think it'd be good for you and the citizens, Steve, to get that meeting going. Okay, do we have a motion? If no one has any further discussion.
I think I have a handle on it, so I'm gonna give it a try.
Okay.
So I move that we allow, well, drive-through businesses in the wording that John has here on the screen, which is drive-through businesses where the drive-through lane is located between the building and the public street unless a 3-foot landscape berm minimum is located between the drive-through lane and the public street. And then with an addition that we want to make sure that Steve Davies has had that meeting with the residents in the area that have been requesting a meeting, and that is in conjunction with this.
This ordinance will become effective in conjunction with that meeting.
Yes, as you know, we need to confirm that that meeting has happened, so the residents have been heard, and they might have some good ideas to help things, but yes.
We have a second to that motion. Councilmember Barker.
Do we want to put in the, do you want to put in the picture, the illustration as the approved layout? Or do
I
you know?
don't have a
Okay.
strong
Then I'll
opinion.
second it.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion as long as it's, I don't know, they're gonna make it work well.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, this is agreement A10-2023, amendment number 9. This is the Village of Providence Point Development Agreement. That being a agreement, it'll require a roll call vote, I believe. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Let's start then with Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Delpas.
Yes.
Councilmember Severing.
No.
Councilmember Swanson.
No.
Mayor votes in favor of the amendment, and it passes on a 3-2 vote. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 7. Is the discussion or action on the North Ogden Police Taser purchase? Chief Quinney?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm not here to ask you about purchasing tasers. We went through all that in the budget process. We have money in this year's budget to go towards our taser purchases. However, when we reached out to Axon, who's the mother company of Taser, for a bid on the tasers we were replacing, they informed us that the model we carry, which is about 15 years old, is going to be obsolete and not going to be possible to stick with that. We've got to make a decision, move on. So they proposed the newest model. It's the T10, the latest and greatest. And with it is a 5-year plan to pay for the entire department, or at least the frontline officers and supervisors to be outfitted with this latest and greatest newest technology in the Taser brand. It does, this program is a 5-year program. We basically are purchasing these tasers along with any and all cartridges we use in the 5 years, including training cartridges, any training we need, training gear, suits. It basically is an all-encompassing program. Tasers break, they replace it. We use it, cartridge, they replace it. And they're basically spreading the cost of this over 5 years. We budgeted $10,500 this year for taser replacements. And in this program, the first year would be about $9,700. And the following 4 years thereafter, about $17,500, give or take. So next year's budget, our taser budget that we would bring to council would be that 17,000, and would be that for the following 4 years. So it's somewhat of a commitment that when we sign this contract, however, in the contract, there is a clause that if for whatever reason the funds aren't available, that we can back out of the program. Basically, they would come get their equipment and we would just be taserless.
What questions do you have for the chief, council? Any? John's informed me that the council can make a commitment beyond the year. I think this is probably something, Jamie's gonna look into this from an accounting standpoint. We probably have to recognize the liability all this year and perhaps the expense. But I think the chief has made it clear that if we want them to have tasers, let's do it. Any questions? I see none, chief. So all in favor of the motion? And I guess we need a motion to approve the North Ogden Police taser purchase as outlined by the chief. First, do you have a motion?
My motion is that we approve the money necessary for the police taser purchases.
We have a second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember John Hess.
So we need the motion to actually approve the agreement, not the monies. So,
What was the agreement?
There is no agreement number. This is just a separate agreement.
yeah, so, yeah, so if you just approve the agreement, we'll be good. Yeah.
I move that we approve the agreement for the North Ogden Police taser purchases.
Thank you, Councilmember Simmons.
Second still.
Thank you, Councilmember Valdez. Any further discussion? I think the key in this, and we talked a little bit before the meeting today, is, as the chief mentioned, if the council for some reason does not appropriate the funds, then it becomes void, becomes a couple of tasers and go. So, okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 None opposed, motion passes unanimously. We also have, the chief's going to talk to us about the interlocal agreement with the Weaver School District. School Resource Officer. This is an interlocal agreement, which is A11-2023. Will require a roll call vote. Chief, you want to go ahead and explain?
Yeah, so we contract, or I should say the school district contracts with us to provide a school resource officer at North Ogden Junior High. Their contract with them expired at the end of last school year. So as all the chiefs and the sheriff who have officers in Weaver County School District schools have been going to the table since about last April and working on a new contract. So the old contract, the formula was a full-time employee's costs, which was calculated 135% or 135,000. 70% of that, which is the amount of time schools in session of the year, and then that would be split 50-50 between the city and the district. We kind of felt that the city was carrying a little bit of more of the burden and that cost than they should with the 50-50 split, because our school resource officer is there 100% of the time when school's in session. So when we went back to the table, our negotiations ended up with an agreement that we would grandfather that 50-50 to 70-30 and do it over 3 years. And that the full-time employee cost would also be adjusted to today's actual cost rather than 5 years ago. So this year in the contract, the full-time employee cost would be at 170,000. And so we would take 70% of that. This year it's going to be split 50-50. Next year 60-40. The year after that 70-30. And that full-time employee cost would be adjusted for the CPI of the preceding year, every year. So basically the projection is this year, our reimbursement last year was $46,875 from the district. Our reimbursement this year will be $59,500, which is a $12,000 $625 increase. Fiscal year 25, it will increase another about 12,600 to 72,742. Will be the annual reimbursement. Fiscal year 26, the annual reimbursement will be 86,461, which is about a $40,000 increase over what it was last year. So district felt good about this. We all felt good about this. So we are ready to bring the contract. It actually just requires the mayor's signature and John as the city attorney. Just wanted to make you aware of the increased revenue and where we're at with the district. I think it's a great partnership. So, any questions?
Council, questions for Chief?
Guys, I have a question there.
Go ahead.
So
Councilman.
Chief, I'm just curious, so, and maybe this is a dumb question, but, so 70-30, we come up with 70%?
The district's portion is 70%.
So do we like share that cost with like Pleasantview?
So they have the exact same contract with the district for their
So
one.
it's each individual? Okay, gotcha, thank you.
So it's the schools within our city limits, correct, Chief?
Mayor,
Councilmember Swanson?
Chief, if we were to have a significant incident within the city and we needed all hands on deck, would the officer who is at the junior high, would they pull away from the junior high to assist?
Yes, it's written into the contract that they understand that that officer will be called away for priority calls. Also be that they account for training and vacation time. And so that's all, yes, that's all accounted for.
Okay, thank you, Chief, and great job in renegotiating. Given the size of each of our residents' tax bill that is accounted for by the district, I personally think the district ought to be paying 100% of the officers' time that they're in the school, but that's for later negotiations.
Well, and I'll tell you, we approached that and there was some mixed feelings on both sides because we as a city and a police department benefit from having that officer up there. To, in my opinion, 30% is a pretty close benefit because if we don't have that officer up there, we're pulling officers off the streets to go up and handle vaping, bullying, spitting on the locker or whatever it is. And we're going to be up there all day long anyway. So I think we do get a bit of a benefit from having that officer in the school.
Thank you for that, Chief. I appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chief, I believe, just to add to that, I think it creates relationships that are long lasting with citizens as they grow up. Having a resource officer there. I know my kids still talk about their resource officer.
Just ask Officer Friendly back there.
My kids still talk about Officer Friendly. Yeah. And I think it makes it approachable and develops a relationship that long term probably helps us too. So,
yeah.
Any other questions?
Just a comment.
Go ahead.
I still have very fond feelings of Officer Podolsky.
All right, so we have an interlocal agreement before us. It's agreement A11-2023. If there's no further discussion, council, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the interlocal agreement as explained by Chief Quinney. So once again, agreement A11-2023, and that's with the Weaver School District. For the North Ogden Police Department Resource Officer Program. We have a motion.
Mayor, make a motion, we approve agreement A11-2023 between North Ogden Police Department and Weaver School District regarding the school resource officer program.
Thank you. Do we have a second to Councilmember Barker's motion?
I second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Do you have any further discussion? Seeing none, then we'll go with you, Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpass.
Yes.
Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
It passes unanimously. While you're there, Chief, why don't you talk to us about the towing agreement that we need to renew. This is several agreements. It's A 12-2023, A 13-2023, A 14-2023, and A 15, and A 16-2023. Want to give us a brief explanation?
Yeah, prior to 3 years ago, we piggybacked on Ogden City's contract, tow contract, their tow rotation. At that time, they decided that they were gonna go sole source and that wasn't gonna work for us, so we put an RFP out for tow services and basically gave our requirements, and anybody that responded that we felt good about to that RFP that met those requirements, we went under contract with. That was 5 companies. True Towing, Stoffers Towing, Loss Recovery, Weaver Towing, and Zach's Towing. And so for the last 3 years, we've been under contract with them to provide us our tow services, which is anything from state tax impounds, safe keeps, traffic accidents where the people involved don't have a preference, and just ask for the next available tow, that they come off of this rotation. And over the last 3 years, we haven't had any issues. We had, one minor that was resolved pretty easily and quickly. We have good relationships with these folks. And in our 3-year contract, we put a clause that at the end of the 3 years, it could be extended 2 years, and then again, another 2 years. So we're at that point where this will be our first 2-year extension. And I've reached out to all 5 companies, and they're glad to keep doing business with us. We have a great relationship. So that's where we're at, is just to get that 2-year extension.
Chief, do you monitor the rotation of which companies are called?
So we provide that list to dispatch, and they actually go through the list. And if a situation comes up where we call for a record, they pull it off the list, but for some reason that company doesn't get that business, they go right back into the list where they were, so that everybody gets a fair share.
So dispatch basically handles that kind of independently.
Yeah.
Because I think if my memory serves me right, there has been problems historically with issues. So you feel comfortable about that?
We don't have that problem here.
I know. But our job is to make sure we don't have the problem.
Yeah.
Controls in place to make sure. So
Yeah, and that's again, Phil helps us keep that good relationship with the 5 companies. Because of that, we keep that fair.
So, okay. Any questions for Chief Quinn?
I should note, there's no cost to us. There's no cost to them. There's no exchange of money between the 2 of us. It's just basically who gets to come pick up our cars.
All right, any questions? Okay, council, I'd be looking for a motion then to approve the North Ogden Police Department towing agreement. As explained by Chief Quinney. We have such a motion.
Yeah, Mayor, I move that we approve the extended towing agreements, and the numbers are A 12-2023, A 13-2023, A 14-2023, A 15-2023, and A 16-2023.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Dalpaz. Got a second? My second. Councilmember Severin, thank you. Is there any further questions or discussion? Once again, this will be a roll call vote. Councilmember Barker,
Yes to all of them.
Councilmember Dalpaz,
Yes to all of them.
Councilmember Severin.
Yes to each of them.
I need to get paid more for this job. Councilmember Swanson,
Yes to all.
thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Was it?
I just thought it was funny, change the order a little bit, the word,
No.
the little things.
Okay. We'll go on to item number 10 then. We're going to hear from Jamie Jones and John Call. Primarily John Call, because Jamie doesn't like to do this, but she's here to support. And we're going to have a discussion on the RDA area. That's coming up in our planning session that's coming up. John, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. Jamie is my emotional support accountant. So yes, this is the second of 3 discussions about this topic and possibly even more. But if you remember, council, we met about a month ago and said, hey, here's a few ideas of projects. And so in a month, we're going to meet and we want to know for sure all the projects that are on the list. And then tonight, we're going to try and whittle down the projects that are in the RDA redevelopment area list, so that when we do our work session on October 5th, we can give you specific projects, specific costs, and hopefully we'll have a little bit dialed in better the amount of money that's available, so that we can then have a report to the state auditor by the 31st of December saying this is how we're going to spend the money and on what we're going to spend it. And so some of the ideas that have been brought up at our previous meeting was the redevelopment of Bicentennial Park, which would include the veterans plaques, maybe the flagpole, landscaping. Another idea is the retrofitting or the refitting of the aquatic center, which includes some replacement, possibly even some new stuff. By new stuff, I mean like potentially new Boweries or things like that. And then there's some discussion about Washington Boulevard improvements, sidewalk landscaping, power poles, things like that. And then the last one that was kind of on the list of those that kind of seemed to kind of rise to the top last time was the South or the North Ogden Plaza, or we call it Southtown, depending on the area. But that's the area where King's used to be. Kurtz is currently and doing some redevelopment work there, helping facilitate some of the potential surfacing of Coldwater Creek or creating some sort of gathering spot. And so tonight we'd like to know which of these projects, or if there's any others that the council has that you'd like us to focus on, so that we can, over the next 3 weeks, we'll get the details dialed in so we can come into you and say, okay, if we're looking at the aquatic center, here's the 5 things we think we should do, and this is how much each of those 5 things will cost. Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Paul, for that great presentation. I think all these are important projects to the city. As I expressed in our last meeting, I think those RDA funds, their very purpose is to create additional opportunities in the city for increased revenue, whether it's sales tax or property tax. I expressed earlier to John and some of the staff that, you know, we can't let the aquatic center fall apart. Fact of the matter, we've got quite a large investment there. It does need some help there. We've asked Justin to give us a list of reasonable improvements that would be needed there. I think in the discussion on that, we need to figure a way, as I've said before, to break that even, because it's being subsidized out of RDA funds now. When those funds disappear, then we're faced with it coming out of the general fund expenditures. So I would think that you know, we have quite an investment there that needs to be maintained and taken care of. So I would ask you to think about that as you have that discussion. And I would say in regards to Southtown, you know, we've been focused on daylighting the creek. I don't think that would have to be part of the plan there, but surely it could be. I would hope as you discuss that, we wouldn't throw that issue out because of the potential daylighting. But I do believe from a business standpoint and generating revenue through the city, that is a prime location. It's actually to some degree becoming a sore spot if nothing is done there in our city. So just throwing out things for you to consider. It's surely your call. I think, you know, Bicentennial Park does need some work. I think we could fund that probably in a different way. As part of our financial plan we have, as you know, that was approved by the council, it does provide for better opportunity to maintain our existing parks, plus provide for new parks. So I think we may have a funding mechanism in place for that already. So anyway, just my comments. And let's start with you before we, I'd hate to have you lose contact with us as you're driving. Do you have some comments you'd like to make here?
I do, Mayor, on the aquatic center has always been at the top of the list for me. We've, as you mentioned, we have a tremendous investment, excuse me, over the last 20-ish years into that thing, millions of dollars. We need to keep it going. I think we do need to have discussions on how we bring it, what we can do to bring it closer to being in the black each year so that the subsidy is as minimized as possible. I think we need to have a discussion about subsidies within the park system as a whole, but that's a whole different topic. Southtown, my only concern with investing in Southtown is that, is there a return for the city investing money when there doesn't seem to have been much, at least in the 18 or so years that I've been here in the city, by the individual building and land and business owners themselves with, there are a couple of exceptions to that, but generally speaking, it doesn't seem to be much of a priority of those who own the land and the buildings to do much to bring business to their tenants, to spruce them up like was done with the strip mall north of Ace, and the investments that the building owners and the landowners made there to make it a more palatable place to shop. I'm reluctant to invest money there without something that demonstrates from those that have personal gain in the equation, without seeing them do more on their own behalf. Excuse me, those would be the biggest projects that I have right now off the top of my head.
Okay. Councilman Barker, would you like to go next or?
Sure. I agree. The aquatic center, I'm of the opinion we should do what we can to make it self-sufficient. If we don't spend RDA funds, then we're gonna have to be spending other general funds on the aquatic center to bring it up to date. The other project I spoke with Dave, that we'd like to mention is the city maintains both sides of the street on 300 East behind Lee's, between mowing and stick edging. And it's just a little bit of sidewalk area. We'd like to put that into xeriscaping. And that's in the RDA, so it wouldn't give us a big return, but it would be save on city staffing hours and also kind of aesthetics, because if it's not maintained, we get notified quite frequently. So I think that's another one we'd like to put on, is the cost to do that.
I agree. I've mowed that area and it's a tough one.
Mhm.
So, okay. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Councilmember Dowpass. Let's go here.
Yeah, sure. Aquatic center is important. I do really like the idea of adding an additional Bowery that gets more rentals, so it's a more of a income stream that comes through there. So that would be one of the focuses I think would be important on that side of things. And I just don't have anything majorly different than the comments here already. Thinking about the infrastructure along Washington Boulevard, I don't know. That seems like a hard one to gauge what the impact is. I know Ogden City several years ago, they went through this plan of planting all their power lines under the ground, but they put all their power lines under the ground, and I mean, I think it's visually pleasing. I just don't know how to track a ROI on that. So yeah, I think we're in line. I've always been very intrigued by daylighting Coldwater Creek. My only concern about that area is, we'll have more information from the Southtown study that Scott and team is working on, for one thing. So we need to remember that that's ongoing and should be completed in the next month or so, couple months. And so that might shed some light, but my biggest concern about that area is there are multiple owners. It's not just one owner that owns the entire strip mall. It's really very, very subdivided into different entities. And I worry about the challenge of bringing all these businesses together and agreeing on one plan. I think it could be possible, but it would be really challenging.
Let me remind you, I think we have a project and a grant to look at that, right? WFRC gave us a grant of $100,000 to look at Southtown. So we probably at least ought to look at it, right? Where we spend money. Okay. Councilmember Severing, would you like to add anything to the discussion?
I'll just express my thought. The North Shore is first in my mind, and then the area around Bicentennial Park, in my opinion, is the second. The other two were down the line.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like, John, we ought to focus the discussion on the aquatic center.
Okay.
And just to put some at ease, I think this council has been very good at looking to the future to make sure that commitments we're making are funded. So that we don't get ourselves in the predicament kind of we found ourselves now. So I do believe our financial plan does provide for those type of things. I guess, John, the second thing I would say is, if I heard things correctly, not in any particular order, we ought to at least look at the Southtown situation there. And I guess the discussion on Bicentennial Park, which is obviously important, is does our plan provide for upgrading that and doing what we need to do? In fact, we've had that discussion, it's not been finalized, I believe, about do we ultimately close Pleasant View Drive at some point in time, make that whole area a park. As many know, there's quite a commitment to parks and trails that have been made by this council. I think we've got about $1.7 million in grants, and the city will be putting in additional monies. We're probably in excess of $3 million. How we spend that, I guess, is always up for review. So that's what I would say. I didn't see a lot of interest in Washington Boulevard improvements. And what was the other one? Having a hard time. So we need to look at how we would do Bicentennial Park, because I think there's options there. Retrofitting aquatic center is apparently at the top of the list. And then probably the daylighting. The thought I had, John, was, what attracts people into our city? Because really, in my opinion, and I could be totally wrong, that's one of the purposes of RDA funding, is to generate more activity in the city. One of the things that came to my mind was, are there other trails or things that we need to look at? Because I think that's one of the mountains is one of the big attractions that we have, in our city. So maybe not tonight, but as you think about that, what can we improve that attracts people into our city? We've talked about biking trails, we talked about numerous things. So does that give any information for us to focus on in the upcoming session, John?
Yes, I think it does. And, depending on how much money is available, we might come in and say, hey, we know Bicentennial was third on the list. But we could do this for 20 grand. We could do these things, where in other spots we might say, hey, we're going to spend $1 million here of the RDA money, assuming that we have that much available. Don't want to promise anything. But so we might come with a couple of things like that, where we're like, hey, Bicentennial, we're going to do the xeriscaping over here for 20 grand, and then we're gonna upgrade the plaques for 5 or something. So I think this gives us some good
I think
direction.
there's deep interest in Bicentennial Park. I guess it's how we fund that. If we fund it out of our current financial plan, or if we use RDA funds to do that. But I think you're right, John. Once we get the list for the aquatic center, because there's been some discussion, do you cover the pool so it could be used year round, right? If that's our top priority, it might say, okay, here's how much we've got left for other projects, which could have some bearing on the decision what we can and can't do. So.
And in fact, I imagine the work session will run it very similar to the way Ramp Grant does theirs, where they kind of say, okay, look, here's all the projects, here's what they cost. Say yes until we run out of money. So that'll be kind of the approach we'll take.
Okay. Is there anything else you need then, John?
No, that's very helpful.
Okay. We can be helpful. You want to take on number 11, John, which is the discussion on the official naming of city projects?
Sure.
Because we do have quite a few projects going.
We do have a lot of projects going on in the city. And I put together a list of some of the ones that have been highest on the radar. And tonight I don't want to focus on what should we name these projects, but I want to focus on the process so that I know that we're doing it the way the council wants us to do it. So that you don't get mad when I name a park after my dog or something and you decide that that's unacceptable. So these are, 6 projects that have happened fairly recently. And a good example is the 2100 water tank. Some people call it the 2100 water tank, and some people call it Randall's Reservoir, and some people call it this. And so we kind of want to organize our projects and give them official names in a way that we can be proud of and move forward with. The Waterworks project is another good example. I've always just called it the Waterworks Park. I don't know that that's the best name for it, but I don't want it to just default to that because that's what I called it because I'm the one who put together the Ramp Grant, right? So what I want to do is get an idea from the council on what's the process you want to do to name these, and then we can establish that, whether that's a citizen group being involved or whether it's a couple council members and Dave and Jamie at the parks. Like I just want to pick a method so that we can get some official names without it just being by default.
I think that's a good idea, John. We talked about such things as, for instance, the community pond project. Would it be the pond at Patriot Point? So that it's associated with a location. Of course, people may say, well, where's Patriot Point? But it can be somewhat confusing. The 2750 Trailhead project, throughout the thing like it, could that be the Coldwater Canyon Trailhead? So people kind of relate to it. But anyway, I think John's point is that, if we're going to name these projects, we ought to have a process in some direction on how we do it. So I'm not sure we should name the disc golf course, though, John, since it's kind of a temporary kind of deal. Anyway, council, let's start with you. Do you have any input, Councilmember Severin, you'd like to give John on how we go about doing this? Or?
I really don't, but I think the name Alley could fit on any one of those.
Okay, Councilmember Dalpatz, do you have any directions?
I think it'd be good to have the department heads come up with the names and then they present them to the council and we say, yeah. I think that would, I don't have any strong opinions.
Councilmember Barker?
Is it possible to name him like John's Waterworks Project and Eric's Pickleball Courts and Jason's Water Tank?
Everything's possible. I think the point John.
Dave can have the trailhead.
I think the point John made is that we haven't really named projects after people, unless they've made a major donation of land or significant financial contribution. So I think what he's saying is we probably ought to stay away from, naming after people. Even though Dave he wanted to name the water tank George.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
You did kind of getting off that one.
No, I'm up to leaving it to staff to come up with names. You don't like my name, so.
Oh, I didn't say we like them. Councilmember Swanson?
I really have no concern regarding the names. I'm perfectly happy for staff to sip and we'll move forward from there.
I think we lost you.
Say that again?
Oh, we lost you for a minute, Councilmember Swanson.
Am I back?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm all for having staff just come up with the name, no council approval necessary. Just come up with the name and tell us what it is and we'll go by that name.
There you go, John.
Okay.
It's wide open. Although I do agree your thing of naming it after people is probably should be avoided.
Okay.
Councilmember Dowpass, I think you're next up. You'd like to discuss council rules and procedures.
Yes, John, can you throw up that revision suggestion onto the screen? And by the way, did you get a chance to, I sent a second response to you and you were able to do that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this came from a meeting that we had a couple of months ago where essentially it felt like there was more of a majority of the council that didn't agree to allow a resident presentation on the agenda. And there was one person that did want to allow it, which is fine. But through the conversation with some other counselors and also through the suggestion of some of our residents that commented in that same meeting, it was suggested that maybe we change the rules of order to say something different. So as it is right now, if a resident or non-resident or an organization wants to make a presentation to the council, they could come to me and say, Councilman Dowpass, I want to make a presentation. And as the rules stand right now, I could say, sure, sounds good. How about it? We'll put you on the agenda. And the suggested revision is just to say what's redlined there, where presentations made by residents or non-residents and outside organizations must be approved by at least 2 city council members. This policy doesn't include elected officials or city staff. So the idea is not necessarily even a majority has to agree, it's just a couple. And it could be as simple as I send out an email to the council and just say, hey, I had a resident that wanted to make a presentation and I want to put this on. One person responds to the email and says, yeah, that sounds great. That's all.
John, I'm just wondering, I've actually put items on the agenda before. How does the mayor fit into being able to put items on the agenda?
So with the current rule, it's just one member of the council. And in our form, right, the mayor's a non-voting member of the council. So you're allowed to. And this would still allow elected officials, meaning if a council member is doing a presentation, they could still be on the agenda. And then same thing with city staff. So if I wanted to add something, we could put it on.
I'm not adverse to having 2 council members approve council members making presentations myself.
I mean, that's not, that couldn't be the worst idea. I don't see how that'd be a big deal either.
So I've upgraded from bad ideas to okay ideas.
I don't know.
I'm fine with that. Okay, any questions for Councilmember Dowpass? He's proposing an amendment to the city council rules and procedures. I believe this would take a form of resolution, John.
Yes.
And that resolution would be 05-2023. So if there's no for, Councilmember Barker, do you have?
Yeah, just like I'm just thinking back to previous meetings. So a couple weeks ago, when in the minutes we approved livestock, the 4-H group came. So they have to get 2 council members that say they can come and speak to us from now on, instead of just going to the mayor or a council member. Because they're not, right? In my understanding, okay.
That's correct, yeah.
So it'd be the mayor and 1 other person too.
Could be, or it could be 2 council members.
Okay, I'm just making sure that I understand.
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Swanson, are you still with us? Apparently not.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion then to approve resolution 05-2023, which would amend the city council rules and procedures as outlined here in the screen, which would require 2 council members, 2 city council members to approve presentations being put on the agenda. You have a motion?
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution 05-2023, which is a adjustment to the city council rules and procedures, which is as outlined on the screen, which is presentations made by residents or non-residents or outside organizations must be approved by at least 2 city council members. This policy doesn't include current elected officials or city staff.
Okay.
Second,
Second by Councilmember Swanson. Is there any further discussion? I don't see any, so Councilmember Barker,
Sure, yes.
Councilmember Dowpaz,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing.
Why?
Huh? Say what?
Why not?
I take that as a yes. Councilmember Swanson,
yes.
motion passes unanimously. Go to item number 13. This is another ordinance change. This would be ordinance 2023-19, is that correct? Since we didn't do one, I guess we're on 19. This discussion will be led by our city manager, John Call. This is regarding an amendment to the sound regulations as outlined in City Code 5-3. John?
Thank you, Mayor. So council, we have a project where we are required to meet a specific earthquake standard. So it's a large water tank. In order to accomplish that, we are required for the floor of that tank to be poured all in one continuous pour at the right temperature within a certain time frame. In order to accomplish that, it requires us to start at 1 a.m. To get temperature and everything, but that violates our noise ordinance. And so what we've done is created an exception that says if the city is pouring concrete for city utilities, and the engineer says it's necessary, that we are allowed to do that, and then also include some language about mitigating any impacts on the neighbors. Where this current project is, there won't be a significant impact to the neighbors, but we just want to make sure that that's involved in the discussion. And we typically, it will probably only be water projects, these large water tanks that will require this type of a monolithic pour because of the adhesion required for that earthquake stability for the tank. This is not an exception that I think we want to take lightly, because we don't typically want to amend the rules just to accommodate us. But I think we do see this one probably as a necessity for the success of this project.
John, it probably goes without saying, but there are a couple houses there, and that those cement trucks will probably be running up and down that lane. Let's make sure we give them adequate advance notice.
Okay.
And the reason why we're doing this, I don't think we have any alternatives when it comes to this. I agree, we surely don't want to just change rules to benefit the city, but this is actually going to benefit the residents by having a new water tank. We have no alternatives. So, council, do you have any questions for Mr. Call? Anyone? If not, then I would be looking for a motion to approve this amendment to ordinance 2023-19 would be the ordinance change. This would allow, let's put on the screen there, for certain things to take place outside of the normal hours, pretty much limited here to the is that I?
Yes.
Okay. Have such a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 2023-19, amending City Code 5.3 with sound regulations and construction activities
Okay, it's outlined here.
as outlined
Okay,
there.
thank you very much. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker. Any further discussion? I see none, so Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpez,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to the council department reports. I believe Councilmember Swanson, we're going to change your presentation to the second
Yes.
meeting in the month so that we'll have the information on sales tax.
Yes. Thank you.
However, we will hear from Councilmember Dalpez this evening if he has anything to report on building and planning.
Sure, just that I don't have a lot today, but we have our Southtown project consultancy that's happening right now. There should be a report that comes back within the next couple of months, which should have a really good impact on our RDA discussions and possibilities. And then Scott Hessen's staff finished an active transportation tour today, right? And so they're gonna have some information forthcoming on how that tour went and any information that will be good for the city council to know. That's it. Oh, I need to finish up last year's fiscal year update on building permits. I don't have that information yet, but I'd like to try to bring that back in the next month or so. So I'll be in contact with everyone on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll now go on to item number 15, which will be additional public comments. Once again, this is a reminder. Please limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes. Please state your name and if you're a resident of North Ogden City. John, do we have anyone online to start with?
No raised hands at this moment.
If you would watch to make sure that no one does that, and if anyone here present would like to make a comment, now would be the time.
Brenda Ashdown, I live in North Ogden. I've been quiet too long. One concern that was brought up when the presentation was made at City Council that I don't think was discussed in your plan today was, should the presentation be made at City Council, or is it something that can just be done in public comments? I know that was a concern for that presentation as well. Chalk It Up contest. Apparently there's a contest with Chalk It Up, but there's never been anything said of who won the contest. There was several, as far as I know, like the drawing contest for the chalk and I don't know, dancing talent contest. Was there judging? My husband went and saw the different things and he wants to know who won the chalk art contest. And then I have another question on that. The city donated $5,000. What did the chalk art program use that $5,000 for? Was it actually used for that? Or is it a donation that the city makes to that charity? And obviously my feelings on that are not going to be very positive if it's a donation that the city makes to that charity, but does not support some of the other charities. I don't expect an answer to that tonight, but I would like that eventually answered. There was a time, and it may have been before pandemic because everything's changed since then, when at the end of the agenda, John had an agenda comment on ongoing city projects. He would update us on what the projects were, where they were, what had been done. I would like to see that brought back. I don't remember which one of you mentioned 300 East behind Lee's. You did? On the west side of that road where the grass is, that was my son's ego project, putting that grass in. And it might be his grandma that doesn't, not me, but his grandma that complains when that grass isn't done. Because I know when he first put it in and it didn't get watered, when she was on the phone, that better get done. But that was just a funny comment. If you guys want to put zero escape, that's fine. I mean, that's been years ago, but thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. Anyone else this evening?
Chris Paul, North Ogden. Just some overall comments that I've been collecting over the past couple of weeks. A lot of interest in the pool bubble. I don't know if that's, we've talked about that or I've heard about that in the past. That's been something that a lot of people, especially some of the older folk that want to keep doing jazzercise, and then swim team people that have to pay a whole bunch of money to go to a different pool, etc. Anyway, just an item of note. Cover over playground equipment. I don't know if that's something that is being done, but that's something that somebody was talking about because their kids basically burn their hands on any piece of metal. Longer green waste season. I don't know. I know to me that would mean, added staff, etc. But that's something that, especially last year where things got a little bit hairy, where leaves fell off way too late and you had all the stuff. That's something that to consider. This one was kind of a safety issue. 2750 north and 500 east, basically right at the north end of the park over here. Basically, the lady has seen so many kids almost get killed that she wanted to see a four-way stop there. And that's something maybe to note. Or just added because people race down that road for whatever reason. The library sign that just got put down here by the parking lot. I don't know how enforced that is, but it says how many people parking down there or over here can park there if they're using the library. So I don't know if that's how enforced that is, but.
I think we have an agreement, John, for what, the use of 6 spaces there while the construction is going on.
Yep.
Okay, so if my car gets towed, then I should park over here. So, anyways, and then some other things, restaurant stuff that people have been yelling for, obviously it's future development. Steakhouse, breakfast. I don't know if you've ever been to up in Idaho, there's a restaurant called Perkins that actually was back east. That is spectacular. If anybody ever hears about that, definitely.
You may remind them that the city doesn't really have any
I know.
input on that. That's
True, but if you hear Perkins, say yes. Don't do that.
We have been pushing for a nice sit-down restaurant, but we're not finding a whole bunch of success. We're pushing hard for that.
Yeah, and then the other thing is something, if Jamie's still here, is there any prepayment penalty for the safety building, the bonding thereof?
No. Other than we have to pay off the lowest rate. There's different tranches on that, numerous tranches. So the penalty is your interest rate goes up
as you pay more off.
As you pay it off, because the requirement is pay off the lowest interest rates. I believe the first tranche on that, John, is like 1.9% overall.
Yeah.
Under 2%. So at this point in time, we're making money on the money we have. We're investing that nearly 5%, while we're paying under 2 on that tranche. And then I think the other one was under 3%. So.
Okay, just, somebody asked.
There is no actual prepayment penalty other than you quit making money on money you have.
Roger that. Thanks.
Okay.
I really don't have much to say, but my legs hurt from sitting there. Kevin Burns, North Ogden. I remember something I want to talk about. I don't know if I'm going to thank Councilman Delpest for reminding me or blame him for making me sound heartless or whatever. But as we're talking about the drive-throughs in the village down there, brought up the point about traffic backing up, and then, mentioned the joint up on Harrison Boulevard, Jack in the Box, and the mess that created. It reminded me of what I see on Fridays with the food exchange down on Washington Boulevard, and substantial traffic that it creates. And I know they put some signs out on the road. I'm kind of curious as to what authority they have to do that and who's issued those permits and that kind of thing, because there is I've seen some sketchy things occur down there as that traffic backs up. And I totally support their mission. But I was just curious as when that topic came up about a potential restaurant causing us some traffic hazards, I just kind of refreshed it in my mind that I wanted to ask about it. So now I've done that. I love their mission. I don't poo-poo the mission, but if there's some stuff down there that can be done with the traffic, that'd be awesome. So thank you.
I think it's a safety issue, Mr. Burns, that we have to pay attention to.
I'm sorry, Brenda Ashton, live in North Ogden. A couple of weeks ago, my husband asked about spraying the weeds along Pleasant View Drive. And within 2 days, the city was out spraying those weeds. And I just wanted to say thank you for that. I know you get a lot of complaints, but I just wanted to recognize that that was done.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I see none. John, staff, anyone here have any comments this evening?
Yes, I've
Yes, Mr. Call.
I've got three. One is we do have that special meeting next week. That's to approve the official canvass for the primary election. That is the only thing we're putting on the agenda, just so you know. And it is a special meeting. And so if you want council, we also could just have it only be that item. There wouldn't be council comments, public comments or anything, but we just wanted to check with you on that. So.
Wonder if people come and try to stop the approval of the election.
I think we are not allowed to go home until it's been approved. So.
Oh, okay.
Second thing is, it was mentioned or it was touched on the idea of these grants or these monies to nonprofits. You know, a council member did bring it up this morning, and it's something we've talked about a little bit. The idea is during the budget process, having people do applications for that type of money so the council can identify this is how much money we have available for the year, and then look at those applications and approve those with a public hearing and all that stuff. And I think that's something we'll be moving forward with, particularly for this next budget year. And we anticipate probably we'll want grants to show up sometime early February, or their applications, so that then we can, by the time we get 2 months down the road and are approving the budget, we've got a good idea of what's been requested and what the council's going to approve.
John, the question may be what the council's procedure is on donating. What that is, that might be the starting place.
Yeah.
Before we go through the process.
Okay.
On if the council feels like that's the highest and best use of taxpayer funds or whatever. I know that Councilmember Dalp has circulated, thank you very much, some information out of the handbook that we have all been given in regards to, you know, having a policy and things of that nature. So maybe we could start with what the council's approach is.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I think that's a great idea. And then the last one was just Ryan's been here a little over a month. She's been doing a great job, and I just wanted to acknowledge that in this meeting. So
There you go. Good job. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Council, any other comments you have? Councilmember Barker, let's send up there first.
I'm sure we're probably gonna say the same thing, but I was involved in a cleanup project Saturday at Oakland Park. We had a great group of citizens turn out, and I'll let Councilman Severn talk about the other one, but it's great to see the city come together and do a quick little cleanup and be involved. And also after 6 years, I feel like I finally made it. I got an ordinance named after me.
Oh, cool. Which one's that?
We just voted on it.
Okay, I guess that.
But I feel good. I feel fulfilled now.
How are the picnic tables looking down there?
really good. I did it Tom Sawyer style. convince someone else to do the work.
It's good. I think it is good to have those type of activities in our community. I think it keeps the community spirit going. I apologize, I had to mix it. Brent contractor still showing up in place. So, okay, anything else? Councilman Parker, did you want to comment?
Councilman Delpas is reporting here in secret, so. Okay, John, did you get those pictures by chance?
I did.
Okay, so Kevin, would you do me a favor? Would you grab the lights? So I just want, well, there were two things that I wanted to mention. I would have to jump to do that off the ladder. But two things really quick. Councilwoman, and I know Councilman Delpas and Barker are probably concerned with this as well, but I know Councilman Swanson and I are concerned about that prescriptive easement up at the Mountain Coldwater for the trail. Has there been any development on that?
Not yet. We've been talking about the right way to approach the landowners and get together with a meeting and just talk through some of the issues without making them think that the city's starting a lawsuit or anything like that.
Okay, all right. I had the same feelings about Kevin with Tri-City. I support the mission, but 2 Fridays in a row, I watched a man just get across the street, an older gentleman who was struggling with a big business. And I was really worried he wasn't going to make it across. And then just this last Friday, I watched a mom with a little wagon, which had a child in, and the other child was just kind of walking behind her. And he almost was going to run out into the northbound traffic before she grabbed his arm. So yeah, very concerned about what's happening there, but grateful for the service. I just wanted to share with you guys maybe a little bit of progression with what's happening at Field Barker Park. So we've got some signs that were donated that we're going to be putting up at different locations in the hollows. And then the next picture, Tim Billings out of nowhere came out of nowhere. He was at the hollow on Monday and said, "Oh, we can take care of a bridge." So this is the bridge. It's currently, this is the what would you call this, Tim? The
Tim's Bridge.
Conceptual drawing.
Conceptual drawing. The next one is actually in process. It's not big and fancy. Maybe one day down the line, we'll be able to make it a little bit more fancy, but this will actually cover, if you start in the parking lot and move up on the trail, eventually it kind of takes a little turn and you have to cross where the stream is at. So Tim is currently working with Eric Casperson to make sure that we've got some legitimate connections into the ground. And then I think I was excited. You guys may not be excited about this, but because I'm really into this, the Dee and Betty Venable family donated this old wagon that they have. And I'm so pumped because what we're going to try to do with it being the Barker Park Preserve is we want to have some spots where we've got kind of some old historical looking kinds of items. And I know exactly, if it's approved, where that buckboard wagon is going to go in the hollow, just as kind of a historical, like somebody just stopped their wagon and left it there. So anyhow, things are moving forward with Barker Park, just slow. We'd love to have your contributions. Time and money.
There you go. Thank you. Councilmember Swanson, do you have anything?
No, I do not.
Thank you. So I do have a couple things. So what's the status of the police impact fee?
So we are waiting for a final document from the consultants. And we've been working with them on that.
So do we have a time frame on that?
I don't, but I will get one tomorrow.
That would be good. Then just for the council's information and citizens who are interested, on September 15th, we will be receiving a visit from the WACOG, Weber Area Council of Government, who allocates funding. They're going to come and look at our requested project, which is to finish the widening of 450 up to 3100. We've applied for some grant funds there to assist us in completing that project. So those who are on the committee will be visiting us on September 15th to look at that. That would probably be, I think we've applied, is it for 2025 or 2026?
26, correct.
2026, you have to apply a couple years out, so. And then I spoke with John earlier. We are going to get the contractor in here and get the negotiation, the pickleball contract taken care of, so we can assure that that is done on a timely basis, so. Just some points of information. Councilmember Ekstrom is not with us this evening, so somebody have to fill on the motion to adjourn this meeting. We adjourn the meeting. It's adjourned, thank you.